This is a special presentation from 97.9 XFM.
My name is Eric Zeller, and I'll be serving as our moderator this evening. And I'd like to welcome everyone who's joined us tonight in the crowd, as well as those who are joining us on live broadcast from 97.9xfm.com. So got an opportunity to catch it in a couple of different places as well. Like to thank our sponsors for this evening, the Effingham County Chamber of Commerce, the Effingham County Farm Bureau, and of course the Effingham Elks Lodge. We appreciate you hosting us tonight. This is available, as I said, of course, this evening live, as well on several websites and social media outlets, 979xfm.com, effinghamradio.com, the Effingham County Farm Bureau's website, as well as the Effingham County Chamber's website on their YouTube channel. So opportunity to come back and review the questions and get to know the candidates better so we can make informed decisions on March 17th. So the forum set up just to go through how we're going to run this tonight. We have a whole host of questions. We'll go through introductions of our candidates. We have try to keep everything straight tonight, and just so the voters understand actually what we're voting for on March 17th. When you see all the candidates here, only a few of them are running against each other. Many of them are running unopposed, but in our 55th Senate seat, or Senate district, which is to the east of Effingham County, all the way up to the Charleston area, down to southeastern Illinois. Darren Bailey is a candidate, as well as Jeffrey Fleming, candidates for the 55th district. And in our 107th, we have a unopposed Democrat, as well as an unopposed Republican that I will introduce here in just a few moments. And over to my left, we have our 109th, and we have two Republican candidates in the 109th who will be campaigning against each other in the primary, and an unopposed Democrat for the 109th district. So if I have that correct, I think I provided everybody accurate information on that. So what I'll do is I will introduce our candidates this evening, and following the introductions, we'll go through a list of questions that were developed by our media panel. Norma Lansing from the Chamber of Commerce, Jeff Long, editor of the Effingham Daily News, Steve Raymond, the publisher for Effingham Topless News Report, and Greg Sapp, the station manager at Premier Broadcasting, developed the questions that we're going to be going over this evening. So we appreciate their help on this. At this time, I'll start on my right, your left, and introduce our first candidate this evening again. I'll start with our State Senate 55th District. Running in that race is Republican Darren Bailey. Darren is from Xenia and is serving in his first term as state representative of the 109th District. Darren is a lifelong farmer and owns and operates Bailey Family Farm, Bailey Family Freight, and B&B Excavating. He served on the North Clay School Board from 1995 to 2012 and was board president from 2000 to 2012. He is a member of the Effingham Assembly Church, Farm Bureau, NRA, Rotary, Gideons, Abate, and Rolling Thunder. Darren and his wife Cindy have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. That is your Republican candidate for the State Senate 55th District, Darren Bailey. Seated next to Darren is Republican candidate Jeffrey Fleming. Jeffrey grew up in Wayne County and moved to Olney, where he has been a practicing attorney since 1974. In addition to his law practice, Fleming is a professional speaker and a member of the National Speakers Association. He is a life member of the NRA, Illinois State Rifle Association, and co-chair of the Southeastern Illinois Friends of the NRA. Jeff has served on the Richland County TB Care and Treatment Board for 36 years and is a township trustee in Olney Township. He is a member of St. Paul United Methodist Church in Olney. He and his wife June have 2 children. And that is your 55th Senate District candidate, Republican Jeffrey Fleming. Seated next to Jeffrey, moving on to our state representative candidates, is Democrat David Siler. Dave is from Effingham and has been a history instructor at Lakeland College for 20 years and previously taught at Effingham and St. Anthony High Schools. He also served 2 terms on the Effingham Public Library Board. He is the vice chair of the Effingham County Democratic Central Committee and served as the committee chair for 4 years. Dave and his wife, Susan, have 3 children, and that is your 107th state representative candidate, Democrat Dave Siler. Seated next to Dave is our Republican candidate in the 107th District, Blaine Willauer. Blaine is currently serving in that seat and is from Beecher City, where he is the managing partner of Longhorn Buildings, LLC. He also partners with his dad and brothers on the family farm. Blaine is a veteran who served in the Army National Guard as an intelligence analyst. He served on the Fayette County Board from 2006 to 2008. Blaine and his wife, Amber, have 3 sons. That is your Republican candidate for the 107th State Representative District, Blaine Willauer. And to my left, we have Andy Hires, and we're moving on to the 109th state representative candidates at this time. And again, just so everyone's clear, we have 2 Republican candidates in the 109th race and 1 Democrat. And our first Republican candidate, Andy Hires, lives in Olney and has served as a Richland County Sheriff since 2006. He began his law enforcement career in 1994 and has served in Texas and Illinois. Andy is active in the community and serves on the Illinois Central College Foundation Board, the Noble Lions Club, Olney Elks, NRA, VFW Auxiliary, and the Olney Richland County Chamber of Commerce. He is a Mason and a Shriner and a member of the Glenwood Church, where he serves as a trustee. Andy and his wife Tricia have 3 children. That is your 109th Republican candidate, Andy Hires. Seated next to Andy is our Republican candidate for the same district, Adam Nemer. Adam was born and raised in Teutopolis and is employed as a senior claims adjuster with Country Financial. He received his bachelor's degree from Eastern Illinois University and is a member of St. Aloysius Church. He and his wife Trina have 2 children. That is our 109th Republican candidate, Adam Nemer. And seated next to Adam, to my far left, is our Democrat candidate for the 109th District, John Spencer. John is from Louisville and owns and operates Complete Home Services. He is a member of the Louisville American Legion and is affiliated with the Louisville United Methodist Church. He has been the Clay County Democrat County Chair for 5 years and is a member of the Illinois Democrat County Chair Association. Spencer has 3 daughters and 7 grandchildren. That is our 109th State Representative Democrat candidate, John Spencer. So I want to congratulate and thank all of our candidates up here this evening. It's not easy to put yourself out there and run in these races, let alone the time it takes to prepare for a race, but knowing the fact that once you were to be successful, all the time it's going to take. So thank you all for being here this evening and being willing to serve. So again, our format for tonight, the questions will start on my far right. You're left with Darren Bailey, and he will get the first question. The candidates will have 1 minute to respond to those questions. We will not offer a rebuttal opportunity because we'd like to get as many questions as we can answered. So we'll start with a minute response from everyone and then roll on to question number 2, which at that point would go to Jeffrey Fleming, and we'll work our way down the line. Julie Stevens from the Effingham County Farm Bureau will be our timekeeper for this evening, and Julie's in the for the candidates' purposes. Julie's in the front row here, holding up the time sign there. You'll get a 30-second time card as well as a 10-second time card, and I will, when the minute comes, I'll try not to interrupt any final thoughts, but we ask you to keep your thoughts roughly to a minute. And then at the end of the evening, or into the questions, we will do a 2-minute prepared closing statement from the candidates. And those questions or the statements will start down here on my far left and work our way this way. So that's how we've laid out this evening's forum. And are there any questions from the candidates before we get going? Fantastic. Let's locate our questions here. We'll start with a nice, easy one to get things going here tonight. On my far right, we'll start with our Republican candidate from the 55th District, Darren Bailey. And every candidate will be answering the same question, and that one is, what makes you the best candidate to represent your legislative district? Darren?
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for this opportunity, and it's nice to see a good turnout here tonight. I sure appreciate that. So, to the question, what makes me the best candidate? I think that this past year, being my first year serving as a representative for the 109th District, pretty well speaks for itself. I've represented like no other. I've worked hard. I'm blessed that my sons can manage the farm, so I'm able to put 150% into this. Springfield and Chicago know where Effingham is at. They know where Southeast Illinois is at. They know where the 109th District's at, and they know what we stand for. Friends, we've been doing the same thing over and over for years, and our state is in a mess because of that. And it's time to push back, and that's what I'm doing. And I think many of you have, you see what I'm doing, and we're getting notoriety. That's how we change Illinois.
Thank you. That was candidate Darren Bailey, and we'll move to our second candidate, Republican Jeffrey Fleming. Jeffrey?
Good evening. Also, I want to thank the Chamber and also the Farm Bureau. It's really nice that you've done this for us, and we really do appreciate that. I'm an attorney and a CPA. With those two qualifications, one of the things as an attorney that I've done through my career is I meet with a lot of people that don't always get along with one another, don't see eye to eye, maybe not even be in the same room, but I eventually get them to put their names on the bottom of the same piece of paper. With my CPA credentials, the other thing I've done through my career is looked at a lot of budgets and for farmers, businessmen, all kinds and professional people. And I also understand what it takes to get to the bottom line. And I know the state is in a mess, and so I want to take the skills I have and go to the state legislature and hope that I can make it better for them up there.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Jeffrey Fleming from the 55th Senate District. We'll move on to our 107th state representative candidates, and our first response will be from Democrat Dave Siler. Dave?
Hi there. Thanks again to everybody for putting this on. I do appreciate it, and I think that more of these sort of forums would be really good. What makes me the best candidate? Well, I've spent 30 years in the classroom being a history teacher and government teacher and walking around all the issues that are out there and really trying to get people to see all the issues from all the different sides, because there's a lot of variety of views out there. I hear candidates say that they represent the 107th District or 109th District or whatever. They'll say that all their people agree with them in there. Well, 12,000 people almost voted for me. Almost 12,000 people voted in the last election for me. There's people out there who don't agree with the kind of the Republican echo chamber, where they just keep saying the same things over and over that may or may not even be accurate. And so I think it's important that I'm out there to give a different point of view and another point and have a different airing out there. So I think that makes me a good candidate. Thanks.
Thank you. That was your Democrat candidate for the 107th District, Dave Siler. And we'll move on to our Republican candidate from the 107th, Blaine Willauer. Blaine?
Thank you. I, too, want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and especially to the Farm Bureau, the Chamber, and the Elks for hosting this event. And it has been an absolute pleasure to represent you folks. I tell people in Springfield, this is God's country down here. It really is, and Effingham especially. But, I think that it's very clear that I share values with the vast majority of the folks in this district, whether it be on fiscal issues, moral issues, or constitutional rights issues. And, I think that obviously that is very, very important. And I'm aggressive. I'm an ideas guy. The state's got big problems. We got big financial issues. We need people who push big reforms to solve this stuff. I've got some very robust legislation that I'm pushing that tackles big problems like our pension crisis and things of that nature. So really appreciate this opportunity tonight.
Thank you. That was your Republican candidate for the 107th District, Blaine Willauer. And we'll move over to my left, and our first candidate from the 109th District answering will be Republican Andy Hires. Andy?
I would like to echo what some of them have said up here. Thank you to the Elks, the Farm Bureau, and the Chamber. We appreciate this opportunity to be in front of each and every one of you. Also to the stations back there that it's the audio and video tomorrow, I think they said. So I believe my 26 years of experience in law enforcement has set me up for this opportunity here. I'm serving the public most of my adult life, all with the exception of maybe 3 or 4 years. I've been in public service. With that, 14 of those years as Richland County Sheriff, been elected my 4th term. I've been able to manage a $1 million plus budget for the last 14 years and supervised over 30 employees in that time. And one of the things that I think is uniquely to me in this position is I've spent a career enforcing and reading laws that are written by our legislators. So I think I have a unique ability there to understand the impact that some of these laws have on real life situations, whereas some may not in that aspect. But thank you for the opportunity tonight. We look forward to the rest of the forum.
Thank you. That was your Republican candidate from the 109th state representative race, Andy Hires. And we'll move on to our, again, this is a contested race in the primary for our 109th Republican seat. And our next candidate will be Republican Adam Nemer. Adam?
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us this evening, taking time away from your homes and your families. And I, again, want to thank everybody for the opportunity to be here with you this evening. We all know that the state of Illinois is in a mess, and it needs fixed. We have one of the highest combination of state and local taxes. Our pension system is broken, and people are leaving the state exponentially. And you wonder, how did we get there? And what can we do to fix it? We need to stand our ground. We need to stand up for what's right. We need to stand up for our principled, conservative values and not yield to the left. We can get the job done. I am the best candidate to bring forth your conservative values to Springfield to enact good, reasonable reform. Thank you.
That was your Republican candidate for the 109th state representative race, Adam Nemer. And our final candidate who will respond to the question is the Democrat candidate from the 109th race, John Spencer. John?
I'd like to thank everyone that's here tonight, the Chamber, Farm Bureau, the Elks Club for having us. It's nice to be here. I've had several life experiences. I'll be 70 next month. And I understand the needs of the working people, and they need better representation, someone that knows what their life is all about. And as far as being able to help the people of the 109th District, I am the only candidate that can be sitting at the table when the pie is cut for funds for our area. And we drastically need more funding for health care and several other issues, and I can get that accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you. That was our 109th state representative candidate, Democrat John Spencer. So that concludes the responses for our first question, and we'll move on to our second question. And leading that one off will be Jeffrey Fleming. And that question is, do you feel the current state legislature is polarized to the state's detriment? If so, what is your solution to deal with long entrenched positions to create a more productive work environment in our state capital? And will you work to that end? Jeffrey?
Well, I could say it's not polarized, but I think we'd know that's not the truth. It is polarized, and we just don't seem to be able to bring ourselves to have enough understanding of each other to where we can, we have to learn to work together and live together. And that's where we are in this state. And so I think what I would like to do is go there to create relationships and be able to build consensus to projects that we need in the 55th district. We need to have things that sometimes always Chicago has ideas of what they think they want, and we have ideas about what we think we want, and we need to find more win-win situations. We need to find situations where there are not legislation that comes out that hurts some of us and not all of us. And so if it's gonna, it has to be more fair, and this is what we need to do. We have to find ways where we can actually work together and make a better state of Illinois.
Thank you. That was candidate Jeffrey Fleming from the 55th District. We'll move on to our 107th District, Dave Siler.
Well, I hate to break the news to some of the folks in here, actually, though, it only appears polarized from the perspective of southeastern Illinois. Actually, Republicans across the state, any place out of southeastern Illinois, actually worked with Democrats to craft a budget. Republicans from across the state worked with Democrats to make the proposal for the graduated tax. So the polarization is coming from a handful of state representatives and senators who apparently think that it's in their interest to make it an issue and to be polarized. They specialize in polarization. I think that's all they do. And I think that actually what it is, it's a good way to rally the base, but it's not a good way to solve problems. And really what I think people ought to do is get together and find common ground. And I don't see that happening.
Thank you. That was Democrat candidate Dave Siler from the 107th District. And we'll move on to our Republican candidate, Blaine Willauer. Blaine?
Yeah, clearly things are definitely a little bit polarized up there. When you have the numbers that we do, it makes that almost a given that happens. But there are some things that we can certainly work on, and I've tried very hard to work on a lot of legislation with some of our Democrat colleagues. I can point to the School District Efficiency Act last year that I was chief co-sponsor on. I'm chief co-sponsor on right now with Rita Mayfield from Chicago, where, we're trying to eliminate some of the administrative bloat in our education system to prioritize tax dollars to our classroom and put us on a path to lower property taxes. I'm pushing probably the most robust and aggressive anti-corruption bills in the state legislature with my Public Servant Trust and Accountability Act that I've got chief co-sponsor Jonathan Carroll from the suburb up in Chicago. So there are some things that we can work together on, but we need to be bold and aggressive, and our party needs to do a better job of advocating real solutions to real issues.
Thank you. That was Blaine Willauer, our 107th state representative candidate. And we'll move on to our 109th race and our first candidate, Andy Hires. Andy?
I do agree. I think it's very polarized as well in Springfield. I think that's going to continue as long as they have majorities and supermajorities. I believe one of the things that we have to address quickly is the fair maps and fair districts. We actually need voters picking their representatives and not representatives picking their voters. Until that happens, I think that we're going to have a lot of polarization there. But I do think while that lasts, we do have to work together. We have to find common solutions that we can agree on without losing our core values. I think it's important that we stick to those core values, but we have to sit at tables and we have to have discussions even if we disagree on those things, so we don't see some of the worst of the worst legislation coming at us according to our conservative values in this area. So we have to earn each other's respect. We have to earn each other's trust. We got to sit at the table. We got to talk, and we got to work through solutions where we can find areas that we can agree to.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Andy Hires, and we're currently answering the question, do you feel the current state legislature is polarized to the state's detriment? If so, what is your solution to deal with long entrenched positions to create a more productive work environment in the state capitol? And if so, will you work to that end? And we'll move on to our candidate, Adam Nemer from the 109th District. Adam?
I do believe that we need to be respectful to each other, and it's not about attacking each individual in Springfield. We may disagree ideologically on the issues, but at the end of the day, we're still people. We need to be respectful of one another. However, my stance is not to compromise, not to yield, not to give in. Because I look at the bills that have been passed the last few years. I look at HB 40, it was an abortion bill. Republicans caved on that. We got nothing for it. The 20-cent gas tax, 20 Republicans voted for it. We got nothing for it. We must stick to our conservative principles, and we will get the job done that way. People will gravitate towards us because it's what's right and just, and we can do it. If we just stick to our conservative principles, we can get the job done and move Illinois in the right direction. We can't yield, we can't compromise anymore. We must stick to it. Thank you.
That was Republican candidate Adam Nemer from the 109th District, and we'll move on to our Democrat candidate, John Spencer. John?
I've got to agree with Dave, but we do need to find common ground and work together and not against each other. We've got several different areas in the state. One thing might work in Chicago, one thing might work in Western Illinois. but it won't work in Southern Illinois. We've got to find common ground so that all of our areas can be represented and we can have what each area needs and not a one fits all. That's how we need to find common ground. Thank you.
That was Democrat candidate for the 109th state rep race, John Spencer. And we'll move over to my far right here, back to our 55th state Senate race with Darren Bailey. Darren?
So you can go to ilga.gov and you can look Blaine and I up, for example, look up the members and look up the bills, and you will see how we actually are working together. Last session, I was honored to be a chief co-sponsor on 2 Democrat bills, and because of that, I was able to bring Republicans along. And this year, the same thing's happening. I have 2 bills, and I have 2 Democrats who are being a chief co-sponsor of that. But here's the big problem. When the Democrats stand up on their side of the aisle and claim that Illinois has a revenue problem, which means we need to be taxing more, we stand up on the other side of the aisle and say we have a spending problem. That means we need to hold government accountable. And as long as we keep when you hear the word compromise, you're talking more abortions, you're talking more taxes, and you're talking more gun regulations. Friends, we have got to draw the line for Southeast Illinois because we simply do not believe in that. So we can do that while earning their respect. And if you check out what we're doing, that is happening.
That was our 55th state Senate candidate, Republican Darren Bailey, providing the final response for our second question. And we'll move on to our third question now that we've determined that clearly we need to work together in the state. Once we've all agreed on that, which I think across the board we decided that was the case, the third question is going to lead off with Dave Siler here. And that question is, how can you work with fellow legislators to bring state funding and support for needed projects, particularly in our area? Dave?
I said 2 years ago that if you look at the history of this area, that it's a history of having bipartisan leaders. We've had Republicans, we've had Democrats over the course of the last 40, 50, 60 years. What happened in 1980 is that actually we passed an amendment to the Constitution that said that we could only have one representative. So since then, we had a Democrat till Bill Grunlow left, and then since then we've had Republicans. To me, the way to actually get something to this area is to have Democrats go to the table. I sat at a forum like this 2 years ago, and I believe it was Jason Plummer who laughed and said, well, he didn't want a seat at the table with Democrats. And I thought that was silly at the time, and as it works out, I think it was silly, because I don't think that serves us well at all. I think that attitude of thumbing your nose at Springfield just doesn't really get much attention very well from Springfield. So thanks.
That was our Democrat candidate for the 107th state representative race, Dave Siler. And next will be Republican candidate Blaine Willauer. Blaine?
Yeah, the biggest thing about bringing state funding to your area is to make sure that that you're diligent about letting people know about the opportunities that are available in your area, the opportunities that bring economic multipliers. I'm a firm believer that anytime the state is investing taxpayer dollars into these towns and areas, they need to see economic multipliers. So there's too many times where this money follows politicians and it don't actually follow priorities. So that's something that I've been very diligent about, and I think that you could talk to the folks in Effingham and Vandalia and Salem, Centralia and Greenville that I've been engaged with those guys to try to get their projects moving through. What we won't do is, I'm not going to vote for a regressive working class tax in order to pay for that kind of stuff without any sort of spending priorities, any sort of ranking system to go along with it. And having a
Thank you, Blaine. And I appreciate
the 1 minute.
That was Blaine Willauer answering our question, how can you work with your fellow legislators to bring state funding and support for needed projects in our area? And we'll move to my left here with our 109th race, and Andy Hires will lead us off.
Thank you again. I'll lead with the approach that I think that we have to work together. We have to sit at the table. We have to have discussions together, again, without compromising those core values. But I think some of the things we could do oftentimes when we're trying to bring jobs to an area or incentives to an area, we base it on number of jobs created or number of jobs that we save. We need to look at things that possibly looks at the median household income of an area, whether or not they are receiving their fair portion of these different incentives that are out there for each and every district. But we certainly got to sit with these other legislators. They have the majorities, they have the super majorities. We have to convince them that our areas are in need of jobs and that we need those jobs in this area, and we need to work with them in order to create those.
Thank you. That was our 109th state rep race candidate, Andy Hires. And we'll move on to Adam Nemer. Adam?
There's way too much pay to play in corruption in the state of Illinois. It's, hey, we want to pass this bill. We're going to grease our hands to get this done. We're going to kind of compromise our ethics and our integrity to get things done. And that's been going on for far too long. And even in our own party, we've seen that, where the establishment Republicans want to reach across that aisle and they compromise their integrity. They compromise their morals. And then what do we have? We have abortion. We have higher taxes and more gun regulation. So when I am sitting there across the table for a Democrat and they have to say, well, I want $1 million in liability in order for you to have your Second Amendment right, or we need to fingerprint you to have your Second Amendment right, I'll be saying, we're going to void the void. That's our Second Amendment right. We need to hold strong to our principles. Thank you.
That was 109th race Representative Adam Nemer, and we'll move on to Democrat candidate John Spencer. John?
70% of the population lives in northern Illinois. If we work with them, they will work with us. If they need one thing, we need a mental health facility down here, we can get a mental health facility. But we have to work with them. They will work down here with us, but we have to work with them. That's as blunt as it can be. We can get along, we can work together, and we can achieve these goals and help all of our citizens in all of these districts if we will all work together and not pull apart. Thank you.
Thank you. That was John Spencer, our 109th Democrat candidate for state representative race. And we'll slide down here to my far right with our 55th Senate seats, or a Senate race again. Leading off that will be Darren Bailey. Darren?
So one of the first things I did when my wife Cindy and I went up after the general election in November, and all the new representatives and senators were there. The very first thing I did literally was go around and invite every one of them to come down here. So I was able to be instrumental with Edwards County, Wayne County, and White County getting the Adopt a Legislator. Farm Bureau has Adopt a Legislator program where they, the Farm Bureau members can go up there and visit their district, and they can come down here. That was amazing. Diane Pappas with Edwards County came down, or with Lawrence County, I'm sorry, came down, and we had lunch at one of the local vineyards, and the vineyard north of town. When we turned to go down the gravel road to take her to the lunch site, she was a little bit tense about that. She said, "Where are we going down this gravel road? Never been down a gravel road before." So we have got to show these people what life is like. We get them in our restaurants. We let them know what minimum wage is doing. And Campbell Energy was able to get legislators down to their oil fields as well to see and understand fracking and the oil situation in White County.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Darren Bailey from the 55th Senate race. And we'll move on to our other Republican candidate from that race, Jeffrey Fleming. Jeffrey?
As I said, I think it's important to create relationships and consensus when you're working in legislative settings. I don't want to look at people as the enemy. I will not compromise my core values. None of us do. Second Amendment, very important. Right to life, all the things that Republicans hold dear. However, I also understand, and I know a little bit of math, and when you have 40 Democrats and 19 Republicans, and you want something for this district, you have to find a way to talk to these people and convince them what we need here. And if it has to be a win-win for them, we hope we can find those moments, but we have to be able to communicate with them and help them understand what our life is like down here, what we need for our district, without compromising our values.
Thank you. And that concludes our response to our third question from this evening. That was Republican candidate Jeff Fleming from the 55th State Senate District. We'll move on to our fourth question, and it gets a little more specific here. And this question will be led off by our 107th district candidate, Blaine Willauer. and that is, do you support the fair tax amendment? Why or why not? Blaine?
No, I can't say strongly enough how I don't support the fair tax amendment. There is nothing more important on the ballot specific to Illinois. This is an opportunity for taxpayers to finally rise up and have a voice. A lot of times we as fiscal conservatives, we've talked about it tonight, we don't have a voice. Well, we have one on this. Everybody's got to vote on it. It's got to get 60%. And, the fair tax amendment failing is a catalyst for a real conversation on some real reform on things that we have needed to do in Springfield for a long time. Even the governor said it. He said that is the only thing I've ever agreed with him on. He said that if this fair tax amendment fails, we're going to be forced to cut spending. I think that's an absolute great idea. But the thing about the fair tax is it doesn't address the problems. We've got a $250 billion pension liability, $25 million a day. What he is proposing to put into this pension system from this fair tax amendment is $100 million. That's a drop in the bucket. This governor is not serious about tackling our real problems. And this is just perpetuates unsustainable government.
That was our 107th candidate, Blaine Willauer. And we'll move on to my left for our 109th candidates. Andy Hires will lead us off there. Andy?
I'm going to have to agree there. I strongly oppose this progressive tax. It was already said up here once tonight. Illinois does not have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. If we generate more tax revenue, they will find a way to spend it in government. It's just common sense. When government gets money, they find a way to spend it, unless you force them to try to find ways to save and cut. So we're going to have to vote. We have to strongly get out there. We have to let everybody know. We have to be very proactive on this to get the word out, so we vote this down, so we do not pass this progressive tax, because what it's going to do is create more revenue just so we can spend more money, and we got to cut some of our spending, and we got to get our fiscal responsibility under control in the state of Illinois.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Adam Nemer, and Andy Hires. And we'll move on to our Republican candidate, Adam Nemer. Adam?
I strongly urge everybody in this room to tell your friends, tell your family, everybody you talk to, vote against that fair tax. There is nothing fair about it. It's just going to continually raise taxes. And right now what will happen is they'll have the bracket set up, and they'll say it'll be what the Democrats propose it'll be, but then they're going to pit one bracket against another bracket and end up raising all of our taxes. Then what do business owners do? They decide to leave. They already don't have a reason to be here. A lot of us in this room, what do we say? The only reason we're still in Illinois is because our families are here. This is just going to be another reason for everybody to leave. Last year, Pritzner's budget was a record-setting $40 billion. This year, $42 billion. We cannot continually raise taxes. It's simple math. You cut taxes, you're going to be able to boost revenue. We can get it done. Thank you.
That was our 109th state rep race, Republican Adam Nemer, and we'll move on to our Democrat candidate, John Spencer. John?
We've got to pass this progressive tax. By passing a progressive tax, 97% of the people will not see a tax increase. We can also take close to 50% out of property taxes, which will then make us have the lowest property taxes of all of our surrounding states. We must pass the progressive tax. It's a no-brainer. If you can't understand cutting taxes, this is the way to cut taxes, by taking money out of the take money out of property taxes so that we can fund education through the state. This is the only way that we're going to lower taxes, is by passing this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. That was our 109th state representative race, Democrat candidate John Spencer. And we're answering the question, do you support the fair tax amendment? Why or why not? We'll move to our right with Darren Bailey. Darren?
Per Illinois Policy Institute numbers, in 2016, there were a little over 24,000 Illinois residents that filed an income tax showing $1 million or more of income. 2018, that number was down a little above 19,000. So, friends, the money, the people left. Okay, they're leaving. That's what they're doing. That's what they're going to continue to do. The money is in the middle class. The prior to last year's budget increase, the savings was proposed at 0.05% for the middle class. We raised an additional, we added an additional $4 billion to our budget, proposed to add another $2 billion. It isn't going to happen. The middle class are going to be built with this budget, and there will be no property tax decreases, but continued increases. You can rest assured of that.
Thank you. That was our 55th State Senate race candidate, Republican Darren Bailey. And we'll move on to our contestor, Jeffrey Fleming. Jeffrey?
I'm sort of reminded of the governor of New York when he stood up and lamented the fact that many of the rich people in New York were moving out of the state, along with their businesses and along with the jobs that went with them. We do not need this, as other candidates up here have said. If we're wanting to take care of the state of Illinois, it's not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem. That's what it is. It's what we've had for problems for quite a while. We have to recognize it. We have to realize there's waste in government. We have to cut it back. This is just going to be another opportunity, as was mentioned, to go along and take different sectors of the state and give them a little more tax, and you won't have as many people mad. We don't need that. What we need is figure out a way to live in a fiscally responsible way here in the state of Illinois.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Jeff Fleming from our 55th State Senate race answering the question. And we'll move on back to our 107th state race, candidate Democrat Dave Siler. Dave?
Yeah, what you just heard here, with the exception of John Spencer, is that Republican echo chamber that I was talking about. Because what they do is that they deny facts. I mean, I'll just tell you real quick here. Adam Nemer in today's paper says that none of the real significant financial problems facing Illinois have been addressed with recent tax increases. And I read that, and then I thought, well, I wonder what the comptroller's site says about that. So the comptroller, I look back, and it says that there was a $16 billion backlog in 2017. Now that backlog is $7.4 billion. Now, I'm not saying that 7.4 is a great backlog. 7.4 billion is a great backlog to have, but to get in and say, well, these increases, they've had no significance. That it's just not true. And maybe they in their, like I said, they get in their echo chamber and they talk to each other and they believe it to be true, but it's just not true. The graduated tax, folks, is the way to fix the problems in Illinois. It puts the burden of taxes on the upper class, and they can afford to pay it. They've done very well for the last 40 years.
Thank you. That was Democrat candidate Dave Siler from the 107th state representative race. We'll move the fifth question for the evening. We'll start to my left here. And that will start with Republican candidate Andy Hires from the 109th state representative race. And that question is, what can we do to stem the flow of Illinois residents who are leaving the state? Andy?
I think there's many things. Number one, we got to bring the taxes down. Number two, we got to defeat this progressive tax, because that will, in my belief, people will leave the state. We have to get property tax under control. Once we bring those taxes down, once we bring regulations on jobs down, and we create more jobs in this state, and more people will move here, the revenues will increase. People will begin to come back. People will stay. We've just got to find ways to address our minimum wage. I mean, it's where I'm at in the state. They can go over to Indiana, live in Indiana, come over here and work for that minimum wage and take that money back to Indiana. So we've got to find ways to deregulate some of our business so we can draw business back here, create more revenue, and bring more people to our districts.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Andy Hires, and we'll move on to Republican candidate Adam Nemer. Adam?
Well, Illinois has the worst credit rating in all 50 states, has one of the highest combination of state and local taxes in the country. We have the second highest property taxes in the nation, and we have the third worst funded pension system in the nation. And we wonder how we got here. We wonder why we're sitting here with a broken economy, people are leaving, wondering how we got into this mess. That's how we got in this mess. We got in this mess through Democrat policies that have continually brought down the state of Illinois. We've got to bring people back. We got to enact good, meaningful reform when it comes to businesses. We need to fight these pro-choice radical abortion legislations that have been choked down our throat the last year, and we need to get Illinois principled conservative Republicans up in Springfield to represent our conservative values. Once that happens, we can get this state turned around. People will come back. It's not a one issue. It's pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and pro-business. It all ties together. And we can do it. We can get everything back on track, but we have got to get good principled conservatives elected.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Adam Nemer, and we'll move on to Democrat candidate John Spencer. John?
What we have to do is we have to get businesses to come into this state. One of the reasons why we can't get businesses in Southern Illinois is we have no broadband internet. We've got the capital bill. We can get the broadband internet here. The money is there for it. Employers know that 3 good, well-paid employees will do more than 5 underpaid, unhappy employees. $15 an hour is no problem. Industry will come here, but we have to get them good roads, bridges, and broadband internet. Industry's no problem to get here, and $15 an hour will be no problem. Once we have that, we can start bringing people back in. People will want to come to this state because we will be paying a better wage than they can get in surrounding states. And it's just as broad as that. The $15 an hour minimum wage is going to help us. Those people.
Thank you. That was Democrat candidate John Spencer from our 109th state representative race. And we'll shift over to my right for our state Senate candidates, Darren Bailey. Darren?
Yeah, this is one of the most frustrating things there are. And I see modeling our government, mainly maybe after Indiana, to be a start where we spread the wealth, we spread business across the state. We have a 2-year budget. You know, I confronted the mayor of Chicago a couple weeks ago when she came to the Republican caucus and suggested that we give Chicago a tax break so they can get a casino built there. Because she was sick and tired of seeing buses of people load up from Chicago and go over to Indiana and spend their money in the casino. So I stood up and said, ma'am, with all due respect, I'm sick and tired of seeing people from Indiana come over here and take our jobs in Mount Carmel and Lawrenceville because we're paying more, because the people have left. There's no opportunity, and business is suffering because we simply cannot afford this minimum wage. And I'm telling you, it's happening as well in Chicago as well. So I see the day of reckoning coming near. Our workman's comp's 2.5 times higher than any state around us. It's a mess. It's time to talk about it and hold government accountable and address it.
Thank you. That was Republican Darren Bailey, and we'll move on to Republican Jeff Fleming. Jeff?
Well, we're number 2 in people leaving the state and number 1 in tax. You think there's a correlation? Absolutely. We can't raise those taxes anymore. We got to figure out a way to make this work. How are we going to attract people to come back to the state of Illinois because they're leaving? We have to make it more business friendly. As he said, we have to do something about reform with regard to workman's compensation. We have to figure out ways in which we can produce our natural resources that are already here. We have oil and gas. We have a wonderful opportunity here in the 55th District to produce more oil and gas. We just need to get rid of the restrictions, the regulations, the bureaucracy that's holding that back. There are many, many opportunities out here in the 55th District where our businesses can thrive. We just need a better business-friendly atmosphere to be able to make that happen. And reducing and the minimum wage, we need to do something about that in a way of it should have been a regionalized situation instead of the way they did it. Even if you're going to do it, you don't have Chicago at the same level as Southern Illinois.
Thank you. That was Republican Jeff Fleming, our 55th state Senate candidate. And we'll move to our 107th state representative candidates. We'll start with Dave Siler. Dave?
Yeah, the real decline in population in Illinois can be dated to a particular point. It's when Bruce Rauner was elected governor of Illinois, and he got elected on a platform of talking about how bad the state was, and that's really, again, that's part of that echo chamber that I hear in terms of talking about how bad Illinois is over and over. And you know what happens when leaders say that? People believe it. And so really what's happened, I think, in the last 2 years is that Governor Pritzker has actually started to turn things around. Again, you won't hear that from leaders here because they're all Republican and they don't want to say that. But the truth of the matter is that Governor Pritzker has actually done a lot already sending money to downstate. For example, here in Effingham, there's money allotted for the Fayette Avenue getting wider. This county, this town didn't vote for J.B. Pritzker, but that he sees that the needs are there and he's going to be spreading the money down. So that's how you, I think, turn it around is talk well about the state.
Thank you. That was 107th State Representative candidate Dave Siler. And we'll move to Blaine Willauer. Blaine?
Yeah, optimism is fine. Blind optimism that's disconnected from reality is nonsense, and it's misleading people. The governor can talk about how great things are all he wants, but we all know that our property tax situation is out of control. And the bill backlog answer was some Democrat echo chamber talking points here. We didn't pay down the bill backlog. We borrowed the money to do it. We still owe the money. The taxpayers owe the money, so it's just shuffling money around. So that's kind of nonsense. But people leave because of high taxes and lack of opportunity. That's poll tested. We know that. And we don't push people towards the economic opportunities that are available in our area. We do a bad job at that. When you teach people K through 12 for the last generation that working with your hands isn't honorable, and if you don't go to college, you're going to end up working at McDonald's, that hurts our agriculture industry. That hurts our fossil fuel industry. That hurts the industries that are the lifeblood of our area. And I'm working with the community colleges to try to correct that.
Thank you. That was 107th State Representative candidate Blaine Willauer. And we'll move two to my left here for our sixth question of the evening. And that question is, do you feel we need pension reform in Illinois? If so, what is your solution, and will you work to that end? This question will be led off by our 109th State Representative candidate, Republican Adam Nemer. Adam?
We need meaningful pension reform in the state of Illinois drastically, and we need it now. We need to open up the Constitution. The Supreme Court, to give you a little back history here, the Illinois Supreme Court a few years ago ruled that the Constitution clause prohibits us for taking any reform action when it comes to pensions. So first and foremost, we need to change that Constitution with an amendment in order to change that clause. Once that's done, we need 3/5, and then it'll be on the ballot for all of us to decide, and we need 60% or 3/5 to make that happen. Once that's done, and don't believe anybody else telling you that we can reform the pension system without that, it has to be done. Then we need to enact real meaningful pension reform. We need to cap pensions, for example, at $132,000. I posted on Facebook, there's a particular superintendent in Chicago that's making $315,000 a year on the pension. $315,000. We need to protect middle-class pensioners down the road. We need meaningful reform today to do that. Thank you.
That was Republican candidate Adam Nemer, and we'll move to Democrat candidate John Spencer. John?
Pensions are a promise that we have to keep. They have to be paid. They're protected by our Illinois Constitution as well as the federal Constitution, so we can't get out of it. They have to be paid. One thing that we can do is get a bond, get the pensions caught up, but we have to find a revenue source to pay that bond. We do not need to go to a 401k type system, because I'm afraid, like what's been happening in the last few days, a 401k could be lost. And we cannot allow that to happen to the people that we've made a promise to take care of them. So we've got to pay these pensions. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Democrat candidate John Spencer from our 109th State Representative race, and we'll move to my far right here. Back to our 55th State Senate race, and Republican Darren Bailey. Darren?
If we don't address the pension problem, it will indeed be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And this is very dangerous, and the people close to receiving pensions, close to retirement, the people receiving pensions need to be very concerned about that. We simply need to address it. We need to talk about it. We need to come up with some ideas. But the other side of the aisle, they will not have it in Springfield. You want to talk about working together? Moot point. Won't happen. So, when I ran for this position in 2017, we had a indebtedness and backlog of $125 billion. That number today is over $200 billion. So, and we can talk about Chicago all they want, but I'm going to tell you what, we've got some past legislators, we've got some past people here in our own 55th Senate district pushing $300,000 in pensions. So we need to limit these. We need to stop stacking them on top of each other, and we have to figure something out. Bondedness, you want to get bonds, that's borrowing money is what that means. That's no good. That hurts the state.
Thank Thank you. That was Republican candidate Darren Bailey, and we'll move to Republican candidate Jeffrey Fleming. Jeff?
Well, we certainly do need to have reform, and it's been a long time coming. We had some back in 2011, 2012 to try to change it, went from Tier 1 to Tier 2, but it wasn't sufficient. We're going to continue to add more people to the state employment, and we have to start making some decisions now to change the pension that they will be under. We cannot continue to pay at the level we are. I understand we still need to attract people to work in government, but we should be able to attract them in other ways, and the pension is just too high. We have to stop it. There is no way in the world we can continue to go at this level. There has to be reform. It has to be now.
Thank you. That was Republican Jeff Fleming from our 55th State Senate race. We'll move on to our state representative race from the 107th District. Leading us off will be Democrat Dave Siler. Dave?
Yeah, the simple answer to pension reform, one of the simple answers is actually the graduated tax, because what that's going to do is have the folks have the income pay more to help pay that. I'll tell you that there's things, I think there's a misunderstanding just about what some of the pension problems are. I heard Jeff just mention the Tier 2 pension. The Tier 2 pension actually is a system that's so unattractive, I'll say it that way, that what's going to happen is that the federal government's going to eventually probably say that the state of Illinois isn't meeting like Social Security standards, and that what they're going to likely do is probably say, well, then they have to start paying Social Security tax, and that can't be put off at all. And so here's the issue is for pension reform isn't you have issues, no question, they're all around. But one of the issues is how to fund those Tier 2 pensions. And you're going to be losing some good employees by folks who don't see a good pension future that way.
Thank you. That was Democrat candidate Dave Siler. And we'll move on to Republican candidate Blaine Willauer. Blaine?
Yeah, the progressive income tax, like I said before, will do nothing for pension to help our pension situation. He's already said he's only putting $200 million a year on a $252 billion debt. That's ridiculous. Why don't we get pension reform? Because there's too much money changing hands in Springfield. Big money special interest, public sector union funds Democrats and Republicans to maintain the status quo on the pension system. And people need to realize that we can't lower property taxes. We can't even think about lowering property taxes or properly funding education until we deal with this pension system. I've got a plan to do that. I've got a plan and a proposal in Springfield, sitting there in the Rules Committee right now, that addresses the COLA. It ties the COLA to the Consumer Price Index to make sure that we're not promising more than our economy can afford. Adam mentioned the cap at 132.9. That's the max contribution for Social Security. It should be the same for us. It protects middle class pensions, but eliminates the stuff at the top. And all new hires got to go into a 401k system.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Blaine Willauer from the 107th District. We'll move over to our 109th District to my left here, and Andy Hires will finish us out here. Andy?
I do agree with those that have spoken here. We do have to have pension reform. First, though, I also agree that I think it's immorally wrong to take it away from those who already have it. There are a lot of teachers out there that don't pay into Social Security. Once you start taking away that pension that they currently have, there's going to be issues there. So I do believe moving forward, we have to find reforms. I also agree that in order to make real meaningful change to our pension program, there has to be a constitutional amendment. We have to have that on the ballot. The only problem that scares me with that is the wording of that and how it's worded moving forward. But we do have to find those reforms. As everyone spoke up here, different ideas and different beliefs. I don't disagree with any of those. We've got to sit at the table, though, and I do believe that even those that have that pension understand that this is a crisis. I think they understand that this is a problem, and I do believe that they're willing to come to the table and have a discussion with this, because I've spoken to some of those members who actually believe.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Andy Hires from the 109th State Representative race, answering the question on, do we need pension reform in Illinois? Now we'll move on to our 7th question, and this one will be led off by Democrat John Spencer. And that question is, do you feel we need term limits in Illinois? If so, what will you do to make that happen? John?
We have an effective way of term limits, and that's at the voting booth. When term limits are enacted, then we have inexperience at the state level, and it'll be controlled by lobbyists. Term limits, we don't need. That can be done at the voting box. As far as I'm concerned, if I'm elected 2 terms and no pension, that's it. I'll be 70 in April, and I don't want to go. I wouldn't want to go any more than 2 terms. I will guarantee that right now, and I would not take a pension. But as far as term limits, we don't need those at all. Thank you.
That was Democrat candidate John Spencer from our 109th state representative race, and we'll move over to our 55th state Senate race with Darren Bailey. Darren?
I guess we have to consider how much experience the men and women that founded this great country had. So, Thomas Jefferson, I believe, is in his farewell address. He said, when men and women of America figure out they can vote themselves entitlements, democracy will fail. Friends, we're there. We've got an apathetic society. We've let things go. So I have a very simple question for you. Federally, state, that's all I'm talking about. The local offices, I don't care so much about, but the federal and state offices, you find me someone who's worth their weight, who's served over 10 years. After that time, it seems like they don't really want to go back to their secular position, and they want to get comfortable where they're at, and they've learned the tricks to do that. It's not working for us, so I've term limited myself to 10 years. I'm a sponsor of a term limit legislation, and as well, all the perks and gimmicks, they need to go. So thank you.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Darren Bailey, and we'll move on to Republican candidate Jeff Fleming. Jeff?
I'm slightly younger than Donald Trump, so I'm not too concerned about term limits for me, and you wouldn't be either. But term limits overall, I'm in favor of. It is something that we need. Our founding fathers, as was mentioned, one of the things they always looked at, when you are elected, you go off and you serve, and it's an honor to serve. It was not intended to be a career. You were not intended to gain great wealth because you served in public office. And after you had served for a while, you come back to your old job again, and then someone else would go in your stead, and they would appreciate that opportunity for that honor to go and serve their constituents. That's what we need to be doing again.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Jeff Fleming. And we'll move on to our 107th state representative race, and Dave Siler, a Democrat candidate, will lead that off. Dave?
Yeah, Jeff's answer reminds me of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln actually served 1 term in Congress, and he only served the 1 term because they actually had kind of a club, in a sense, where they took turns going, and the guys from Sangamon County would take turns and voluntarily do that as well. And I think that's a good model as well. I can't help but chuckle when I hear Republicans talk about term limits, and John Shimkus has been the Republican congressman from this area for, I don't know, what's it been, 25 years. And I didn't see them calling him out, and I don't understand that. And I see other Republican leaders not getting called out, and yet, it's a good talking point. It's in their echo chamber again, where they talk about, oh yeah, we're all for term limits until it's our guy, and then we'll overlook it. And that happens time and time again, folks. I think 3 terms is probably enough. If you look at the experienced people, there's only so much to offer. But I think the voters have that choice.
Thank you. That was Democrat candidate Dave Siler, and we'll move on to Republican candidate Blaine Willauer. Blaine?
I think there would be a certain state senator that served this area for several years in 2016 that would probably disagree on the John Shimkus thing there. But, why do we have so much corruption in Springfield? Why do we have so many people that don't deal with big problems? It's because politicians stick around forever. They amass so much power. They become so big, so powerful, and so unaccountable to the people that they think they can do whatever they want. This corruption deal, it's a big deal. I talked about the influence peddling. It's why things don't get done. I'm a strong proponent of term limits. I've term limited myself, and I think we all should, and we should, especially at the leadership level. We can talk about the ballot box all we want, but the reality of the situation is, in districts like ours, it's very hard to raise money. The people that are giving politicians money to perpetuate themselves are special interests, and it becomes very difficult to beat them at the ballot box.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Blaine Willauer, and we'll move over to our 109th state representative race with Republican candidate Andy Hires. Andy?
I agree 100% that term limits need to be in place. When I started this campaign, I said 8 years. I was going to self-impose those if we don't get legislation passed that requires that. So one of the ways to get that done is propose that legislation every year. It is in there now. If it's not in 2021, we need to propose that legislation. We have to get term limits. We talk about being able to do it at the voting booth, but money is poured into these elections. Not only that, I mentioned earlier in the night about fair maps. We draw maps so voters do not get to pick their legislators. Legislators get to pick their voters. And if you want, you can stay in Springfield for as long as you want. And we need to get those term limits in place. We need to get folks out of there after 8 years. If they want to run for a different office, that's fine. But 8 years in the House, they should be gone at that point. If not through legislation, through self-imposed term limits. And also, I agree with the fact that legislators should not be receiving pensions. So I will not be taking that pension as well.
That was Republican candidate Andy Hires, and we'll move on to Republican candidate Adam Nemer. Adam?
I do agree with term limits. I think we need to have term limits at the state and federal level. I have signed a term limit pledge, a congressional term limit pledge, that I am saying I am going to term limit myself as well. Because what you end up having is you have career politicians who become all too powerful, and everybody knows this name, Mike Madigan. We're just going to say it out loud in this room. He has been in power for far too long. And if you want to talk about our own party, we've got people like John McCain that was in for far too long. What about Ted Kennedy? These gentlemen end up passing away in office. They attain all of that power, and it's just a power grab. As far as pensions go, I will not take a pension. I am the only Republican up here who will not have a taxpayer-paid pension coming my way whenever I retire. And after 12 years, I'm going to find something else to do. And I believe that we need to term limit each office. I will not seek public office after I serve my 12-year term. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Adam Nemer offering our final response to do we need term limits in Illinois? And we'll move on back to my far right, leading off our 8th question of the evening. Will be Republican candidate Darren Bailey from the 55th State Senate race. And the 8th question for tonight is, how do we keep Illinois from going bankrupt? Darren?
This is what I've campaigned on from the beginning. We hold government accountable. We pull back our spending, and we shrink government size. Friends, every department out there, DCFS, state police, health, every department out there is a disaster. No one is being held accountable. We can, I have I've focused on 3 priorities. It's education, it's our infrastructure, and then ultimately it's our Medicaid issues with our nursing homes, our hospitals, our elderly, our disabled children, and Veterans Affairs. If we can focus on those, we can live within the budget of even 2 and 3 years ago. We can do this because every time we see increased money coming in, it just gets spent to the 4 winds. We create new problems is all we're doing. The answer to our problems, more money. We throw more money at education without any accountability while adding mandates, unfunded mandates that people cannot keep up with and requires more administration to take care of. So shrink the size of government.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Darren Bailey. And we'll move on to Republican candidate Jeff Fleming. Jeff?
Even though it may sound like an echo chamber, I'm going to say that we need to shrink the size of government. We continue to add layers all the time. Just a quick example. We have federally regulated firearm dealers. And they decide we're going to have to have state licenses. So now we have this whole system now that's going to be put in place to regulate the firearm dealers with a state license. So now we have to hire people to administer that program. You're not safer. So what do? And not only that, when these people are in there, eventually they're going to have to be paid money with a pension. So now we have an entire layer of, again, bureaucracy on the state that's already broken and bloated. And we do it again. We keep shooting ourselves in the foot. As a state, we need to quit. We need to realize we have to shrink the size of government if we're going to survive.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Jeff Fleming from the 55th State Senate race. And we'll move on to our 107th State Representative race. And our first response will be from Democrat Dave Siler. Dave?
Yeah, I go back to the beginning of the Bruce Rauner administration again. And if folks who were connected with state government or connected with education, what happened is that there was a tax that had been passed back during the Quinn administration, and the tax went down. And so whenever Bruce Rauner came in, there had been a tax cut that had been passed by a Democrat legislature, for whatever that's worth. But anyway, what followed was chaos actually in state government and in higher education, and it was a mess. And there were, I think DCFS is still trying to crawl out of that hole that was created by Raunerism. And I think a lot of the higher ed institutions are attempting to still crawl out as well. It appeared to me that Governor Rauner actually intended, and I think his supporters intended, to kill EIU and Western Illinois University. And they almost got it done. And so if we don't cut with intentionality, I think we have a problem.
Thank you. That was Democrat candidate Dave Siler, and we'll move on to Republican candidate Blaine Willauer. Blaine?
We're 14th in the nation when it comes to per pupil funding for education. I think we're in the top 5 when it comes to per pupil higher ed funding. So it's not necessarily that we're underfunding education. It's not making it to the classroom. I think you would like my district efficiency reform that I have there. But we need structural spending reform. That's the only answers to our problems. I think we need a taxpayer bill of rights that puts a 1% cap on property taxes. We all the time we're pushing legislation that crowds out core services, the things that we need the most. We need to start pushing legislation that crowds out waste. 1% cap on the property taxes would be a excellent way to start doing that. Structural spending reform is the only answer.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Blaine Willauer from the 107th State Senate race, State Representative race. And just so the candidates are aware, this will be our final question for the evening, and we are answering the question, how do we keep Illinois from going bankrupt? Once we finish this question, we'll move into our 2-minute closing statements. But at this time, we'll move to my left here and continue with our question with Andy Hires. Andy?
I think the answer to that question is everything that we've talked about here this evening. We've got to lower our taxes. We've got to find reform for businesses. We've got to cut regulations. We talked about workman's comp earlier. We talked about prevailing wage, or we haven't talked about prevailing wage, but we should be talking about prevailing wage. We have got to find ways to get businesses back to our state. Once we get business friendly, we will have businesses come back and our revenues will go up. It's just common sense. If you stop taking people's money, allow them to use their own money to invest in their businesses, to invest and buy things of their choosing, you will see revenues increase in this state, and you will see individuals wanting to return to our state. But we got to get taxes under control. We got to get corruption under control. We got to get spending under control. Once we do that, and we get our regulations under control and deregulate some of these businesses, we can get folks back to this state, and we can increase our revenues, and we can keep ourselves out of bankruptcy.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Andy Hires, and we'll move on to Republican candidate Adam Nemer. Adam?
To me, it's pretty simple. We need to cut taxes and cut spending. People will come back, they'll gravitate to the state, and we can make Illinois great again. It's pretty simple, right, folks? You cut spending, you cut taxes. In addition to that, I'd like to have a forensic audit on all departments in the state of Illinois. Because what we can do there is we can look at waste in each department. I hear constantly on the campaign trail about horror stories of waste in Illinois departments. And they'll say, Adam, hey, you didn't hear it from me, but such and such is doing X, Y, and Z. So we need to examine through a forensic audit each individual department to cut waste and spending. Secondly, we need to promote TIF districting in each municipality and within our district. Now, we're doing an excellent job in municipalities of doing that today in spite of the poor legislation coming out of Springfield. But if we can boost economic reform for the district, for the state of Illinois, people will come back and gravitate toward this state. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Adam Nemer, and we'll move on to Democrat candidate John Spencer. John?
Just a couple years ago, we was pretty close to being bankrupt, but now in the last year with JB, we've crawled out of that a little bit. It's going to take a while. 3 years without a budget really put a crimp on the state. We're going to dig out of this, but it's going to take time. We have to bring in more industry. When we get $15 an hour, that's going to be more people paying in more in taxes, and that's going to help the budget quite a bit because it's just common sense. People's going to have more money. They're going to spend it. That's more taxes. That'll keep small business open. A friend of mine, well, as a matter of fact, a friend of my son-in-law's, his friend had 2 restaurants and was going to close one of them because the minimum wage in Seattle was going up. Anyway, now he's got 5 restaurants. Thank you.
That was Democrat candidate John Spencer from the 109th District answering the question, how do we keep Illinois from going bankrupt? So that concludes our questioning and answer portion of the evening, and we're going to move on to our closing statements. And as we talked about when we started this evening, we started our questions over here on my right with Darren Bailey, and we're going to start our 2-minute closing statements to my left with Democrat candidate John Spencer. And just so the crowd and those catching us on the live broadcast and on social media in the future recognize that we have 2 candidates from our 55th state Senate race, both Republicans, and then our other contested race that we have up here this evening is from our Republican candidates in the 109th race. Everyone else is running unopposed in the primary for this year. But we'll start with our 109th state representative candidates, and Democrat John Spencer will lead us off for a 2-minute closing statement. John?
I want to thank everybody for being here again tonight, and the Chamber of Commerce and Farm Bureau. I have several things that I would like to get going here in the 109th District. One is to get Route 50 back on track to be a 4-lane highway. Another thing that's very important to everyone in this room, Illinois needs the severe criminal, the harshest in the state for telemarketers. We've got to do something with them people. We need a plan for early detection for health care. You go in and see your doctor, and the doctor prescribes, thinks something's wrong with you, you can go get an x-ray or a CAT scan. We have to have that. That'll save lives and money as well. We also need more safe child care centers so that young mothers will have someplace to take their child so that they can go continue their education, or so that they can go to work without having to give all their money to a babysitter. We need education. There's been a lot of talk about school consolidation. I am deathly against school consolidation, but I am for unit consolidation, where each town could maintain its own school, but be under one unit administrator. We need to use the capital bill. We can get that. We're paying for that every time we go to the gas pump. We need broadband internet all over the 109th District as well as Southern Illinois. That money is in that capital bill. We've got to get it. We need roads, bridges repaired. The money is in the capital bill. And we've got to help agriculture, and we've got to create jobs. And we can do that through industrial hemp. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Democrat candidate John Spencer giving his final 2-minute closing statement. And we'll move on to, just to his right, Republican candidate Adam Nemer. Adam?
Thank you. Again, thank you, everybody, for being out here this evening, spending time with us, learning a little bit about each candidate that's running for each individual race. A few things I'd like to tell you about me before you leave here is, one, I'm very pro-life. If you leave here this evening, you're wondering a little bit about Adam Nemer, I'd like you to take that home with you. That's essentially the reason that I decided to seek this office, is that radical abortion legislation that came down last year. I decided to throw my hat in the ring, so to speak, to combat that radical legislation and really give a voice to the voiceless. And that's why I am so proud to have the endorsements of Illinois Family Action and Illinois Federation for Right to Life. So if you go home this evening and somebody says, who's Adam Nemer? What's he stand for? Number one, I'm pro-life. Secondly, I am pro-Second Amendment. I believe that we need to void that FOID card. We need to get it out of the road because that's a direct violation of your constitutional rights. And as far as compromise and reaching across the aisle, you keep hearing this. It's been resounded this evening. That has gotten us absolutely nowhere. Where would that get us with our Second Amendment? Instead of $1 million, $500,000 liability? Instead of big, larger fines, a little bit less fines? No, we need to void the void and get it out of the road. We need to be pro-business. We need to bring businesses back to the state of Illinois, because if we keep going in the direction that we're going, we're not going to have a state left to save. But I do believe firmly, as I sit here with you all this evening, and I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't believe this, that we can turn this state around. I believe that for our children and for our grandchildren's sake, we need to stand up for our principles. We need to do what's right. And we need to enact good, principled, Christian, conservative reform. And lastly, I'd like to say that we need to bring God and Jesus back into the Capitol. It's so important because I really, truly believe that if God and Jesus were back into that Capitol, these radical legislation, the taxes, the spending, the abortion, the compromise on our Second Amendment would not pass. So on March 17th, which coincidentally is my birthday, I will ask for your vote. Thank you very much, and God bless.
That was Republican candidate Adam Nemer providing a 2-minute closing statement. And we'll move on to Republican candidate Andy Hires. Andy?
I would like to agree. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I want to thank the Elks again, the Farm Bureau, the Chamber, as well as all the candidates up here tonight. This is a tough thing for people to do, to come up and give their voices and run for this office, because it is a struggle on families. I want to thank my extended family for being here, as well as my family, not just extended family, as well as my wife and kids who have tolerated me through these last 7 months of this campaign. So with that, what got me in this race was my background. I've got 26 years of public service. With that, I saw that in Illinois, there was an attack on not only law enforcement across Illinois, across the nation, but as well as law-abiding citizens. I felt there was attack happening not only on law enforcement, but being a divide, a wedge being drawn between law enforcement and the people we serve. So that was some of the things that jumped me into this race. The Second Amendment issues is very important to me. There were laws coming out that were infringing on that. We talk about that FOID card, repealing that FOID card. Honestly, I don't think we should stop there. We are paying $150 for a concealed carry license. Just to carry a weapon, if you're a law-abiding citizen, you should be able to carry without that license. We are infringing on people's rights every day. And if we lose that Second Amendment right, if we lose that right, there are more to come. That's the only thing that protects all those other rights that we have. So we got to fight to keep that Second Amendment right. We have some of the worst abortion bill come out last legislative session. We have got to stop that. We got to regain our clarity on abortion. We've got to stop this type of law. And I think that's happening across our nation with President Trump. He is appointing conservative judges all across this nation. And I think with those appointments, we are going to see a change in this abortion law, not only in Illinois, but all across our nation. We are seeing it in other places. So we have to keep working to get businesses here. Jobs, jobs, jobs. That is what is important to our area. We've got to get these regulations under control so we can get those businesses to our districts. Thank you.
That was Republican candidate Andy Hires from the 109th state representative race. So for all of you who are listening in the southeastern portion of our county and area, those are your candidates: Republican Andy Hires, Republican Adam Nemer, and Democrat John Spencer. And we'll move to my right here with our 107th state representative race, and leading off our 2-minute closing statement will be Republican Blaine Willhauer. Blaine?
Thank you. Thank you for hosting this tonight. Thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to share. I really enjoy this. I tell people it's one of the favorite things I do in this campaigning is go around answering questions. Everybody sees the problems that we have in Illinois. You can't hide them, whether you're Democrat, Republican, or you're, socialist. The problem is the Democrats don't have a plan to fix our major problems. They do a lot of talking about supporting working people and helping the little guy, but every policy that they push literally ensures that those people won't have opportunities in the state of Illinois. But, Republicans aren't unscathed on this either. And I've been very bold and aggressive about this in Springfield. Republicans need to do a better job of laying out a plan a vision for a future, something that solves the big issues or puts us on the right path. And that's something that I've been very passionate about. And I think a lot of the, Darren and, a lot of the folks up there with me have been on there. We need to give people a vision. We need to give people hope for the future, and people need to know what things would look like if we got a little bit of power in state government. We need this taxpayer bill of rights. The taxpayers are very oppressed in this state, and it drives out opportunities. We need to have the strongest anti-corruption measures in the United States of America. If anybody needs it, we absolutely need it here in the state of Illinois. We've got plans for that. We need to start looking at our regulatory environment and promoting policies that prop up working class wages and don't just prop up the interests of the special interests in Springfield and DC. And finally, we got to know, people need to know that we can't move forward until we deal with this public pension crisis. So I encourage everybody to get on ILGA and look at the bills that we're sponsoring that address these issues. Thank you so much.
That was Republican candidate Blaine Willauer, and we'll move on to Democrat candidate Dave Siler.
Yeah,
Dave?
Thanks again to the Elks. Thanks again to Greg Sapp at WXEF. Thanks, Eric, for moderating, and thanks to everybody else as well. I'm going to tell a story. 2 years ago, I was a candidate in this race as well. And one of the things that an issue that hasn't really come up here today is labor. I guess that's one of those special interests. I guess that makes me a special interest. I don't know. But anyway, so I'm endorsed by the IFT, Illinois Federation of Teachers. I was endorsed by the Illinois Federation of Labor, Illinois AFL-CIO. What's interesting is that I wasn't endorsed actually by some other labor groups that I went to. I went to SEIU. I asked for their endorsement. I didn't get it. I went to IEA, Illinois Education Association, asked for their endorsement, and I didn't get it. And you might be wondering, well, Dave, if you're so pro-labor, why didn't you get their endorsement? Well, one of the things is that we had a conversation, and I'm always trying to find, I am who I am in front of this group and any group. And so one of the things was that SEIU asked, say, Dave, where are you on the $15 an hour minimum wage? And I was like, I'm with you in sentiment. I said, I don't know how that works downstate. I think there's some concerns. I wonder if there's some issues, but ideas about regional wage, could we look at some different things like that? And you know what? They didn't give me their endorsement. I talked to IEA, and the IEA folks said, Dave, where are you about pensions? And I said, well, hey, pensions promise, we got to do it. I said, but I think there's a lot of us out there, I'm part of this group, in a sense of the pensioners, or the future pensioners. And I said, we, some of us are interested maybe in some hybrid ideas. And then they then explained to me about, well, that wouldn't work, how this couldn't. And I'm like, well, I understand that you feel that way. And so I left those meetings saying, you know what, if you don't endorse me, I still endorse you. But the reason I tell you that story is that that's me. I'm going to say what I think in the middle of, whoever the group is. And so I think there's a quote I have, I don't trust words, I even question actions, but I never doubt patterns. And my pattern is to try to find common ground and get along. So I'm Dave Siler. I hope you'll vote for me. Thanks.
That was Democrat candidate Dave Siler providing the final 2-minute closing. And those are your 107th state representative race candidates. And for our friends on the western side of Effingham County and all the way out past Greenville and in Vandalia, a large 107th district, on March 17th, you've got Democrat candidate Dave Siler and Republican candidate Blaine Willauer. So now we'll move to our final 2-minute closing from our 55th state Senate candidates, and we'll start with Republican Jeff Fleming. Jeff?
I also would like to thank the Chamber, the Farm Bureau, and the Elks for this opportunity. I want to thank you very much for coming out tonight and showing your interest in what's going on in the state of Illinois. I also want to take just a moment and thank also the Farm Bureau not only for doing this, but also last week they had a mental health summit, and that they were taking up the issue of mental health and suicides in the farm community. And I just want to say that I really appreciate the Farm Bureau for doing that. It is a problem that needs to be addressed. We need to look at it in depth and try to see what we can do to turn that around, because it is really a sad situation that needs to be addressed. I just want to thank the Farm Bureau for taking the lead in that and doing it. With regard to the 55th District, as I drive around in the 55th in my campaign, one of the things I notice, I drive through communities I've been in before, And one of the things I noticed, the population signs have smaller numbers. That's a concern for me. And I know what it tells me, and that tells me people are moving out, and so are the businesses and the jobs. Economics can solve a lot of problems. We need to have a state where we are more business friendly. We need to have a state where people can come and enjoy their opportunities in business and in jobs. I've lived here nearly all my life in Illinois. It couldn't be a better place to be. We need to make it that way. We need to keep it that way. And if we can develop our natural resources, and if we're allowed to do that without state interference, if we can get rid of regulations, if we can reform some of the areas that are keeping us from being business friendly, we can have a better place where Illinoisans can enjoy life.
Thank you. That was Republican candidate Jeff Fleming, and we'll move on to Republican candidate Darren Bailey. Darren?
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for weathering this and being here and listening, and everyone that's out listening and taking the time. Thank you. This is what makes this great republic function. So I've got a bill that I've written this year. It's HB 5119. It's a tax credit for foster parents. And a year ago during Foster Day, a gentleman came up in my office and from up north of Springfield and sat down with me and told me about this situation. And I just thought, wow, this is interesting. So I began, the tedious task of working with him and talking about what this might look like. So he came up a few weeks ago and began to circulate this bill around the House. And he was asked many times, especially by the Democrats on the other side of the aisle, why didn't you bring this bill to us? And he said, well, I was here a year ago and Darren Bailey was the only one that sat down and listened to me. So I want to tell you something. I think that exemplifies me. I jokingly said when I first started running a couple years ago, you remember in 2016 presidential race, Donald Trump said, we're going to win so much, we're going to get sick of winning. I promised people that I'm going to represent the 109th so much you're going to get tired of representing. Well, thank goodness I don't think anyone's got tired of representing, but I've been in the hospitals, I've been in the schools, I've been on the farm, I've been on the oil fields, I've been in the businesses, I've been in the restaurants, and I listen. And I carry that. That's what a representative does. The worst thing in the world that we can do for our elected officials is pat them on the back and send them off and tell them to go get them. Friends, we have got to be engaged, but you got to have somebody with common sense values who understands that and is able to carry that. Interestingly enough, Kelly Cassidy, she's the author of the that abortion bill that was passed, in Memorial Day weekend. She's a chief co-sponsor on that bill. So I think that says a lot. I think that explains a lot. Friends, that's who I am. I'm a hard worker. I have 8 grandchildren. I have a vested interest into making this state the greatest state again. And I hope that, again, you will put your trust in me and allow me to do that. Thank you, and God bless.
That was Republican candidate Darren Bailey from the 55th State Senate District. And just so everyone's aware, incumbent Dale Ryder from the 55th District is not running. So on the primary, when you go to the ballot on March 17th, you're going to see our 2 Republican candidates who we've heard from tonight, Republican Darren Bailey and Republican Jeff Fleming in that slot for the 55th State Senate race. So that concludes our evening this evening. And I, again, would like to thank everyone up here for taking the time to be here, and everyone in our crowd who joined us live, and those who are going to join us on at the broadcast and possibly on social media. Thank you for taking the time to get engaged. And I'd encourage everyone to go out and vote on Tuesday, March 17th. Thank you very much.